what do you think it takes to build a unicorn in construction tech space?
You need to solve really big, important problems. And you probably need to do it in somewhat of a novel way that hasn't been done before.
What's your advice on structuring the pricing models of services or products for startup founders?
So I've heard people say there's kind of three ways to price a product. You do it on value, value, understand the value you're creating and capture a slice of the value. Is it that? Is it cost plus, where you understand your costs, you're going to put a margin on top of that, and that's a way to price? Or is it even competition driven, where if you're in a crowded space and maybe you know the market norms of competition, you either want to be the premium product or you want to be at parity or you want to undercut the market and you're doing it competition based. I personally am not a fan of competition or cost plus. I'm a huge fan of value-based pricing.
What's some of the key lessons you've learned while scaling build?
How do you build talent density really early so that then you can build a talent vortex around that talent density? Because we've all heard A players attract A players, or Clydesdales want to run with Clydesdales. And we've also heard A players attract A players, but B players attract C players and all of these things. And it's very real.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Groundbreakers, where we reveal the stories behind the most successful founders and operators in AEC technology, from exits in the multiple hundreds of millions through to the struggles of building in a resilient industry. We've got you covered. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
Okay, Chase, we just had a little chat. So let's just set the scene a little bit. So Build Technologies, I think it's the first company that's currently valued at unicorn status that we've had on Bricks and Bytes. I think the other one from memory was Procore, but obviously they're public now, so that doesn't technically count. So congratulations, I guess. Let's go. What do you think it takes to build a unicorn in construction tech space?
I think, well, first, it's awesome to be here. Big fan of what you guys are doing. So
Thank
getting
you.
that out of the way, you think firstly, just to build, I think anything of real value, agnostic of the construction industry, it implies you need to solve really big, important problems. And you probably need to do it in somewhat of a novel way that hasn't been done before. And if you do that, there's an Elon quote that I always love. And he says, you get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of the problems you solve. Well, as it turns out, in construction and real estate, there's a lot of big problems. There's an abundance of them. And if you can find a unique angle within that to really dive in and ultimately create a lot of value for people, I think the side effect is that you produce a lot of enterprise value. And so related to construction, though, I think one extra dimension I would add that's probably important in most other industries as well, but definitely here, is so few companies ever really get to real scale because it's really hard to get distribution. And so I think distribution is something that is particularly important, finding some unique way to get real scale across the industry. Everyone loves to talk about the vanity metrics of how big construction is globally, or here in the US, where I am. And it's true. It's really, really big, but you can't paint it all with the same brush. So I think it's really important to kind of find the part of the industry that you're going to serve, at least initially, and absolutely crush it and build trust by creating value. And from that, you're able to parlay that into finding or earning the right to really solve more problems, create more value. So in our case, I think we've been fortunate that we definitely found some problems that were underserved. And the last piece is, I know you've got to have a a whole lot of perseverance because these journeys are just damn hard.
Chase, okay, so let's dive maybe into these problems. What problems do you guys solve?
Yeah. So at Built, we would say our mission is to connect and simplify doing business in real estate. Construction clearly being a key part of the real estate industry, but very specifically, kind of the vision being, we want to fundamentally kind of transform commerce. So we're focused on how do we very specifically connect people related to kind of the movement of information and money. How do we help people make better decisions? How do we help them transact and complete their jobs and collaborate with others in much better ways? And when we look at the both construction and broader real estate industry, to us, it was like, okay, it's an industry that relies on money. So there's that part of the equation. There's investors, there's lenders, there's corporate balance sheets, there's the money, there's an owner that ultimately to us is kind of the creator of construction or real estate demand. Unless you want or need to build something or own and operate something, then there's not much purpose for that. And clearly there's the people that need to construct, kind of the planning, designing, architecting, ultimately building everything. And so for us, we're kind of aimed at that entire ecosystem, which ultimately is where we landed with the name. We wanted to serve the built world. And I'm sure we'll unpack a lot more of the method to the madness on where we started and why. But that's what we're up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go there then. So, 2014. What was this? What was the day? What was the weather like that you decided, you know what, I'm going to do this?
You know, it really kind of starts back in 2013. I got the itch. I started seeing what was happening with technology. I wasn't like the kid that grew up, the technologist writing code from when I was like 9 years old. I have been a problem solver my whole life. And as I've learned about myself through the years, I turns out I like really big problems. But back in 2013, was thinking a lot about kind of what I wanted to sink my teeth into, some big important problem, and was frankly looking at financial services, was looking at healthcare. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, big healthcare town. Certainly looked at real estate, massive industry. All of these things felt destined to change with technology. And as it turns out, one of my best friend that became one of my co-founders, coming out of the financial crisis, he had gotten into residential development. And kind of opportunistically, Nashville, Tennessee was one of the markets throughout the US that was kind of rebounding more quickly than most. And he had jumped in and was kind of I would say a self-performing owner. And through that process, he had really started to develop some frustrations with like, how do you get financing? And if you get, investors and ultimately lenders to finance projects, that process is a bit of a pain point, both getting it. And then once you've got it, it's not this easy thing. You have to draw down on your loan and make capital calls to ultimately use the money to pay people and buy things. And what he was noticing was that a lot of the subs he was working with on his projects were prioritizing jobs based on who paid the fastest and the most predictably. No surprise, cash is king, and especially in a tight labor market. And so he had identified that. And in a conversation I was having, like, well, what are the biggest pain points you're dealing with? He's like, it's funny, I've been talking about that with what became our other co-founder, Scott. And he's like, it feels like the way we work with our lenders to finance these projects, every single lender has kind of a different process for how you draw down on the loan. You're like picking up the phone or sending a fax or an email saying, hey, I did a bunch more work. I need to draw down on this to pay people and buy things. And this kind of reactive domino effect, bit of a ridiculous process. And part of that process required third-party inspectors. Here in the US, they call them draw inspectors or commercial consultants. In other places, I hear quantity surveyors, people that really go out and look at the property to validate that the work really happened. No one's, committing fraud. And he was frustrated because it's very time intensive. So he'd make a draw request, and some number of days and sometimes even like weeks later, he'd end up getting his money. And as a result of that, he did not have the money to pay all of those subcontractors, and they were prioritizing other jobs, which was slowing down his project. And as as he talked about, is like, there's got to be a better way. And here I am listening to this just as a friend, really, like, yeah, surely there's a better way. And like, oh, it sounds so simple. Like, why don't they just connect everybody? And I had a little bit of empathy for the problem because in my prior life, I helped kind of initially scale a restaurant concept that's gone on to great success called Taziki's Mediterranean Cafe. And in doing that, I actually got construction loan and I lived that process and I'm like, yeah, this is ridiculous how it works. And so that real problem, we pulled that thread. I was like, well, why does it work that way? Oh, turns out the people that have the money care about it going where it's supposed to. Intuitively, it makes sense. But if you're the owner of the project, you're like, well, I know I'm not committing fraud. I just need this money to pay people. Like, there's got to be a more connected way to do this.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
And as we thought about it more, we realized, this isn't a lending problem. People always ask, is Built a fintech business or a prop tech business or a construction tech business? And I would say I identify like we're closer to what I would say like real estate or construction tech business. And it just so happens that money is the proverbial spigot that fuels it all. Of course, there has to be money. And the more efficiently you can help money move, the better. And the more you can help give confidence to the ecosystem participants from like a risk management perspective, turns out they're more keen to lend into the space or invest into the space than if it's frankly a shit show or if there's no transparency to what's going on. And so we kept thinking about it. And the last thing I'll say that was kind of the impetus for what we decided to jump into was we also realized like, okay, this massive industry but it's highly fragmented and there's lots of information asymmetry where people don't really know how long things should take or how much things should cost. And we're like, wow, I learned in the restaurant days, like, which is another fairly low margin industry. If you want to succeed in that, we used to say, you need to kind of manage the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. Get really smart at purchasing and wringing out all of the waste, labor, food waste, all the waste. We're like, wow, the construction industry is fraught with a lot of waste. And it's really, the information's out there, but sometimes it's inaccessible to know what things should cost or how long things should take. And we were like, man, if we could actually aggregate a lot of people onto a platform, we'd start to get information, we could connect them better. And maybe over time, someday, we could actually even help them buy the things they're trying to buy better, meaning more conveniently with more transparency and ideally at a better cost. So that was the original idea that then, ultimately we said, well, where the hell do you start? Like, how do you eat this elephant? And for the eating of the elephant, what we did was we zoomed out, right or wrong, and we said, like, follow the money. And what we meant by that was really follow it upstream. If you think about on the construction side of things, if there's like manufacturers to suppliers to, wholesalers to distributors to the retailers to subcontractors to general contractors to owners, most people stop there. But most owners are the sponsor of a project, whether it's a consumer building their dream home, a skyscraper in Manhattan, a government building core infrastructure, and they require capital. It takes money to build things and then own and operate real estate. And we thought if we could actually, what if we took it one step further? We knew my buddy Andrew and my my other buddy Scott, we started the company together, knew how frustrating it was to actually work with these lenders. They hadn't evolved the way they made construction loans in a long, long time. There's a budget on a spreadsheet. You make draw requests against it. They validate the work. They fund, wash, rinse, repeat until you hopefully finish the project or you have a bigger problem. And then it stabilizes. You refi or pay it off and move on with your life. And we thought, man, like, okay, what if we could actually go work with the lenders that are the largest source of capital fueling global real estate and construction, give them a better way to deploy capital more efficiently and with better risk and compliance, which, by the way, was very, very important coming out of the financial crisis, where so many, particularly banks, got wrecked in the financial crisis because of real estate and construction and like A&D lending became like a no-no. And we looked at that as like, well, it's not all bad. It's getting a bad rap because yes, things got pretty ugly, but we think that we could give them more confidence in this. We could definitely give them more efficiency, which should mean they could make the product itself, a loan product, more profitable. If it's more profitable and less risky, they should have more appetite to do it. And if there's more appetite to do it, then that means more owners can get capital to kind of build the communities around us. And we thought, like, how hard could it be? Let's start with highly regulated financial institutions and sell software to them and help them collaborate with their borrowers and other third parties like these inspectors and even title companies. And if we could do that, then over time, we could kind of earn the right to follow the money downstream to serving the owners, various types of owners, and even the contractors and subcontractors all the way down that value chain.
And that was the thinking at that time, or are you talking about it right now retrospectively that was kind of obvious?
Even from the beginning, that was actually the thinking was this big connected ecosystem. Let's start with lenders. Let's march our way down. Let's build software. I'm sure we'll unpack this more. We thought it makes sense that we should digitize payments. These days, people have put fancy terminology to that, like embedded payments and embedded fintech. Back then, we didn't know what that meant. We thought it's ridiculous that at least in the US, most construction payments were happening with paper checks and this, ridiculous, physical paper being signed for lien waivers exchange and other compliance documents. We're like, that makes no sense. Surely we should digitize that. And then the last piece being this marketplace idea, what I call marketplace, like help people buy stuff better. We thought surely if we can get all these captive people, we should actually be able to connect them. If we're effectively aggregating demand, how can we connect them to supply for the various things they need to buy? Whether that's, most people don't think about it this way, but when you get loans, you're really, or investors in equity, you're buying capital. There's clearly professional services related to this industry. There's labor, the actual people building stuff or maintaining stuff. There's physical building materials and appliances and fixtures and the furniture and decor that goes into these assets. And then lastly, data. Like we did know all of that. What I didn't know was how long it would take to really be able to execute on so much of that. Because here I am 11 years later, and in many ways, on some days I'm like, man, it's crazy how far we've come. And other days I'm like, oh my God, like I don't even think we're not even out of the first inning. This is ridiculous. And it's at times super frustrating. Like, we should be so much further, but perversely, I kind of do love, how complex this problem is. And there's a lot of reasons for why it's difficult to get to real scale. But yeah, we did know, Martin, that we had this kind of pretty grand vision that has evolved since then. And I can unpack that too, of other realizations that we've now made of like, holy shit, from here, we could also do this and this and this, just logically, listening to customers that certainly has evolved.
Yeah. Maybe first we should go to a simple question, but how does Built Technologies generate revenue?
We serve today, the fast forward, started with financial institutions, really lenders, bank and non-bank lenders. We sell them software. So we have subscription revenue from software. We also do have a marketplace. So in that world, lenders need to buy inspections and plan and cost reviews, and they do contractor reviews and contractor monitoring. They do lien monitoring, especially here in the US. There's all these services they need to do. So we realized, okay, we could sell software to help them manage their construction loan portfolio and collaborate with their construction borrowers. And they also need all of these services, and we don't provide directly those services, but we connect them to ecosystem participants that do. So that's a big part of our business. We now also serve various types of owners, particularly those that are active in development, we have subscription SaaS revenue there, as well as payments revenue, because we actually help them make payments. And then we also serve various types of contractors, especially general contractors, sometimes larger subcontractors, where they too are using our platform to manage their finances on projects and on their kind of portfolio of projects and payments and capture compliance documents. So again, with contractors, it's SaaS plus payments with grander aspirations over time. But that is how we ultimately make money.
Do you have like a product which brings like 80% of the revenue, or it's more spread out into the various products?
It's evolved now. Our largest product is probably no surprise where we started. In our initial wedge was build really badass construction loan administration software for lenders to connect to their borrowers and other key stakeholders. But that is off the cuff, probably these days, sub 60% of our total revenue today.
Did you start like just thinking of the early days? Was this like was the strategy to go like hyper niche to the lender and maybe a specific persona within the whole lender umbrella, which and over time looks like obviously, like you say, the wedge, and then that has expanded into this other suite of products. And by what you said earlier, the future is you've got even more planned.
Yeah, I think, not to say we weren't we were super intentional with what we did, and I'll share kind of the initial approach there. But in hindsight, as I have navigated this journey, and I listened to lots of podcasts and listened to other kind of founders that have built amazing things, I'm like so jealous sometimes. Like, man, they were so much smarter and intentional with their initial ICP. And in our case, what we did know was my co-founders were working with different banks personally to actually develop and build things. And we're like, well, let's go talk to those banks and kind of first ask them, why do you do it the way you do it? Is this also a pain point for you? And if it is, would you be interested in working with us to solve it? And once they kind of figured out we weren't like undercover regulators, they were pretty keen to open up and be like, yeah, managing construction loans is frustrating, and it's hard, and it's labor intensive, and construction loans have a unique risk profile. And they were willing to kind of jump in with us on this belief, because we were these crazy folks that were passionate about solving that problem. And so in our case, it was, let's start with those. We had 3 initial banks that I would today, in hindsight, would say were great, awesome community banks. Community banking in the US is kind of the lifeblood of construction. It's evolved since. Private capital and the money center banks, clear and super regionals, they all play a big role, but really community banking is the lifeblood of construction. And we started with community banks, initially 3 of them, that the terminology most would use is they became our design partners. And when we really launched the business initially in mid 2015, we focused on just them. We didn't try to sell to anybody else. It was just get this right with all the different personas, the day-to-day administrators, the inspectors, the credit department, the relationship managers, the actual construction borrowers, which were home builders or commercial borrowers or consumers. How do we actually give all of these people a great connected experience? And by the time we got to 2016, we were like, okay, we think we're onto something here. This is working. It's creating real value. Our customers were telling us. And our approach at the time was, again, this like follow the money, right or wrong. It wasn't so much ICP specific. It was, well, where is all the construction? And what at the time we figured out was it felt like about 50% of all construction in America was really happening in 20 cities, the top 20 metros. And we're like, okay, how do we go get, we may not, obviously we can't get everyone to say yes, but how could we go get 10 more customers after the first 3? And let's go target these top 20 cities and try to get another bank that looks like the banks we're already working with. And if we can get them, then we kind of plant a flag, and we could hopefully use that to go start to get other lenders. And through that, we get exposed to all of their borrowers, and we could start to kind of build a groundswell of people that realize, wow, there's a better way to manage the construction loan process, whether you're a consumer, building your dream home or a major renovation, whether you're a home builder, building spec homes or pre-sold homes, or doing land development, or a big builder, that's got sophisticated lines of credit, or if you're a commercial, a commercial client, building, whether it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied commercial real estate, we thought, how hard can it be? But let's go that way. And in doing that, on one hand, what we realized was it was exciting because people kind of, once they kind of begrudgingly took our meetings, they were like, oh, this is not what we thought you were going to show us. Like we'd never imagined this sort of collaborative experience around this process for this loan product. That was part one. That was very energizing. The part two, though, was, it kind of rained down on us that, wow, as it turns out, there's a lot of statutory implications to the way different, lending works in different states. And turns out that not all these lenders work the way the initial lenders that we worked with kind of in our backyard. It turns out they don't all work that way. And which again, actually perversely became more and more exciting, because what I felt was if we can untangle this mess, and it's a mess, if we can untangle this and actually elegantly solve it, what I had noticed in all of my favorite companies that have gone on to change the world with awesome products is that they solve really hard problems in a really elegant way. And they kind of democratize making it easy for everyone else, to where it's just, as humans, we want the path of least resistance. No one would ever do it any other way. And so as I started to see how screwed up this was, I was like, oh my gosh, if we can simplify it, this is going to be really big. Because, again, law of big numbers, when you're talking about an industry that's measured in the hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars, and if you can make that better and create real value for those people, then you can zoom out. And of course, we should figure out ways to capture a fair slice of the value that we create, monetize, and we can build something really big and special. And so that was kind of the early go to market. So it was both frustrating because we realized we got a lot of work to do to really solve this problem, but exciting because we're like, if we do it, this has the ability to be very, very large.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting and very smart. I think that you started from the financial services because, as you said, follow the money, right? If you had you started with like construction companies, I don't think that would go far, because construction companies are not playing cards here, right? They are actually relying on the financing, right?
They're an effect.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm happy you said that. Let's unpack that, because I think that's a really important strategy. When I said follow the money, what I didn't probably finish in that is, yes, the money is super important, because without it, the industry doesn't work. Everyone downstream needs money to do their jobs and play their role in the equation. So, but it's also really important because, as it turns out, the money is the least fragmented stakeholder in the ecosystem. So it's like, okay, there's fewer people. It's not, not the death of 1,000 paper cuts. If you were to try to go get every single contractor, every single developer or subcontractor, not a right or wrong. Other people have built awesome companies taking that approach. But in our case, it was okay, how do we have the maximum impact in the shortest period of time? Well, if we could get the money, the lenders, through one lender, if we could get one bank or one non-bank lender on the platform, making this up, but maybe we get 100 construction borrowers. And through those 100 construction borrowers, we could actually go downstream to, potentially hundreds or even thousands of contractors, subcontractors, suppliers. And all of these people benefit from, if we do our job right at the top, of actually helping the people deploy capital with more confidence and more efficiency and faster. Everyone downstream benefits from that. So they should hopefully like Built, because we're helping them get their money faster and easier. And such that if we do that, maybe they're again going to be willing, if we come to them and say, hey, we think we can help you too, hopefully they would be more interested in letting us help them. And so it's a distribution hack, but also the last part is, it turns out the money is unbelievably influential in the money flow. They care a lot. It's the old, he or she who has the gold makes the rules. It's real. And and most people don't think about it this way, but if you get a construction loan, no matter what you're building, the fine print of that loan agreement is going to give you a bunch of rules that you must follow as the borrower in order to get the money. And then that owner is going to hire, let's just say they hire a general contractor. The language in that contract is also going to specify, hey, contractor, you've been awarded the deal, this project. You have to do a bunch of things in order to get the money from me because I have to do a bunch of things to get the money from the people above me. And then what the general contractor do with all of the subcontractors? They create contracts that say, hey, subcontractor, as you perform your duties, you've been awarded the project. You have to do a bunch of things in order to get paid because I have to do a bunch of things for the owner because they have to do a bunch of things for the owner capital, on and so forth down the value chain. And so that was one where, again, it was intentional where we started, but we didn't really understand just how important that influence would be, which again became very, very exciting. And as the business has grown and evolved, I think we're frankly just scratching the surface of how important the seat that we sit in really is for the entirety of the ecosystem.
I'm super curious about like your efficiency metrics. So like when you were helping these banks to facilitate these loans, like what was the process before you and after you? Like was it cheaper and how much, or shorter and how much? Maybe if you can give some averages.
Yes. So ultimately in business, why does anyone probably buy anything? And it probably kind of, I think, boils down to, can I help you make more money? Can I help you manage some key risk or compliance requirement in your industry? Or potentially, can I expand your competitive moat and make you more attractive for your clients such that it really protects your business? But in my mind, I try to think a lot about like how really everything any business could do for another business maps back to one of those things. Somehow I'm making you more money, I am expanding your competitive moat, or I'm helping you manage some key risk that is required to kind of protect your business. And in the case of lenders, they care about all of those things. How do lenders make money? They charge fees and ultimately interest, and then they want to get paid back. And on a construction loan, a lot can go wrong because technically they're making a loan on an asset that doesn't yet exist. And statistically, everyone knows that most projects don't go as planned. Both they don't hit the timeline, they don't hit the budget. And so if you're a lender, that's not exactly what you want to hear when you're making a loan. And so as we sold in, we know that, and especially coming out of the financial crisis, so many lenders were just scorned by construction and land lending and acquisition development lending. So it was like, we need to give them more confidence in helping them actually have transparency into the state of their construction portfolio, kind of see the needle in a haystack, if you will, of which projects aren't trending to complete on time. Where is there insufficient funds to complete? Where is the velocity of the contingency funds in a budget? Kind of the velocity of contingency utilization, which is a mouthful. How is that trending? Are they blowing through the contingency such that like we're going to have a problem here? They're going to run out of money, and then they're going to have to bring more equity to the deal. So we knew we needed to help them with that so that they would have more confidence. And frankly, if they had more confidence, they could also get the regulators, if it's a bank, to also have more confidence that they have kind of a pulse on things. We also knew that because of how these loans were being serviced, a construction loan, oversimplifying, but usually the way it is you book a construction loan, and then these lenders, these financial institutions, give their team that's going to manage it and service the loan Microsoft Excel, access to some core loan accounting system that they're going to update as you draw down on the loan manually, and email is the predominant collaboration tool with their borrower and with these third-party inspectors and title companies, all these key people. And so it's expensive. They were throwing bodies at the problem. And then the last is draws. From the moment a construction borrower makes a draw request to the funding event was, again, many business days, sometimes even weeks. So bringing it back to the before and after, what we found with our first clients was, wow, they really valued having transparency into the portfolio. We had like the stale loans report, no draw or inspection activity in the last 30 or 60 days. Velocity, contingency utilization, interest reserve sufficiency, these things that they were always a pain for them to actually see, they could now see, gave them more confidence. Check. The team, as it turns out, I'll give you one of our first clients, their back office had 11 people to manage the construction portfolio. After fully deploying Built, it turned into 2 people. Powerful.
Yeah.
Well, which again could sound super negative, but those 9 people in that case happen to be redeployed into other parts of the organization. But so ultimately that's huge. You can kind of do the math on what that might look like. And I'll tell you a funny story on that. And then the last was the draw turnaround time. From request for funds to the funds are out the door in the borrower's hands such that they can pay people and build things and move on with their life. That process for kind of those first few customers, on average, let's just say they were taking 5 business days. And if it went really wrong, like they accidentally clicked an email, marked it unread on a draw request, and they forgot to look at it again, they'd have some borrower call them 10 days later, like, where the heck is my money? That happened too, because there was no system around it. But let's just say it was 5 days. Well, in that case, for that particular type of construction lending where we started, which most people might call home builder finance, it's really where we got our start, lending money to home builders to build houses to sell to people. We took a 5-day draw turn time and turned it into same-day funding.
Wow.
And that was a very big deal because you have happier customer now, happier borrower, because they can now pay people and move on with their life. But also, the bank actually makes more money because construction loans are interest only typically. So they make more money when the principal balance of a loan is bigger. And so if you can fund the loan faster, the principal balance grows, you accrue more interest. But counterintuitively, going back to the beginning, you're doing it with better risk management. Because normally the way you would solve that problem would be someone makes a draw, and if you don't care about risk management, you just fund it. Well, at some point that can end very, very badly. And in our case, we actually gave them better risk management capabilities and transparency to what was going on and confidence because we built a mobile app for the field inspectors to where they were validating progress instead of handwriting it on an Excel spreadsheet that they had printed out and taking, digital camera pictures and trying to map it back. We built a mobile app that tied all of that together and validated work put in place and geofenced it so you knew they were on the job site and not committing fraud by taking pictures of a different asset. All of those things, we did that. And as a result, you got to the trifecta. You give them better risk management. And in multiple ways, we help them make more money and ultimately expand their moat, their competitive moat, because now all of these borrowers loved working with those lenders and the word got out. And that actually became part of how we grew the business because they started telling the other lenders that they worked with, hey, there's this new tool called Built that one of my lenders is working with. You guys need to see this. That's what happened.
Beautiful. I think there's like few thousand community banks in the US, right?
There is.
What's your market share? How many do you work with? If you can, whatever you can share.
Yeah, we work with today a little over 300 financial institutions, probably 80% of those being banks, as well as we work with credit unions, so other depository institution credit unions. We work with, in the non-bank space, everything from big kind of the private capital, private credit, very large institutional private credit, hard money lenders, independent mortgage companies even. So a few different non-bank lenders, as well, the debt funds, all of that, as well as in the bank space. Within that, so yes, there's in count, you're right, there's directionally 4,400 banks that exist and do construction loans. Back to follow the money, we think a lot about it as, well, of all of them though, which ones are making all the construction loans? And when you do follow the money, you find out directionally that about 75% of all of the construction loans coming out of the banking ecosystem in America are coming from the top 300 banks. So if you're going to work smart, in addition to working hard, let's make sure that we really penetrate that part of the market. In addition to the long tail, because they too need help. Again, I can't overstate, I love community banking because they are the ones in the communities for the people, providing capital to the people that are actually building the communities around us. So, because everyone loves to ask, do you have the money center by these big banks? And don't get me wrong, they matter a lot. And we do work with a lot of them. We work with 16 of the top 25 banks today. We work with directionally 50 of the top 100. So we've penetrated the biggest banks in America and in the world. However, I do look at the total asset size of a bank or a non-bank for that matter, as a vanity metric, because you could be a very large financial institution with lots of AUM, but you might not do a lot of construction or real estate lending, in which case you'd be a terrible client for you. We can't add that much value to you. Meanwhile, you could be a community bank where that's really your bread and butter. That's what you do. You lend money to people to build things and to develop real estate or improve real estate. And so those people, it could be a disproportionate percentage of their assets too. So we serve all of that. But Martin, that's, in terms of count, we work with a little over 300 financial institutions today, touching at this point, active, live, over $200 billion of construction annual spend, as well as we've diversified our business into also even helping them manage their stabilized portfolios. So that's an ever-growing part, a new part of the business, kind of more stabilized commercial real estate, and many billions of that as well on the platform.
Chase, without going too broad, but let's maybe keep it in the context of perhaps the financial institution, banks and whatnot. What's your go-to-market strategy to these people?
Direct. So ignorance is bliss, because selling into highly regulated financial institutions, as it turns out, is quite hard. And in some cases, I get why. They don't have a lot of reason to want to kind of want to buck the system and do anything that could be deemed as risky. So innovation, on one hand, don't get me wrong, bankers, just like everybody else, they want to innovate, they want their lives to be better, but at the same time, they are regulated, and they have a lot of reason to not want to adopt things that are this new shiny object. They really want to be, no one really wants to be first. And so our go-to-market, though, was initially, I would say, kind of hand-to-hand combat of just going in and telling people, like, our belief is that you probably agree construction loans are deemed high risk and expensive, and we think we can make that better. And we've approached it in a pretty novel way. We were so bad in the early days of communicating how we fit into their broader systems landscape. Most bank and non-bank lenders have loan origination technology to originate loans, and then they have servicing technology to service those loans, handle the loan accounting, like a big fancy calculator that tracks interest on loans. Well, none of those systems were really purpose-built for the idiosyncrasies of construction. So what we thought was like, well, let's be that. Let's make sure it's clear what we are, and let's make sure it's clear what we're not. We're not trying to replace your loan origination system. We're not trying to replace your core loan accounting or servicing system. It's complementary, but what we are trying to replace is get you off Excel spreadsheets on these budgets, help you manage the full capital stack of a construction deal, because it's more than just the loan. These capital stacks can get very complex with both various equity sources, mezz debt. You could have government grants. You could have all kinds of stuff in addition to kind of the senior note that might be fueling the majority of the project. And we figured out how to position to them how we fit into what they did, both systems wise and operationally. And once that started to click, we did kind of open people's eyes, and very fortunately, they were willing to take a bet on us that if it worked, it could drive a lot of efficiency, help them accrue more interest on these loans, and give their customers a better experience. And we were able to parlay our success. So because we didn't get overeager in the early days, in hindsight, we probably should have gone to market even faster, more aggressively. But in some ways, I'm grateful that we didn't. We focused on getting it right with our first customers. And once they kind of told us, like, you guys are adding a ton of value, I think on one of our deals where directionally we were charging them $50,000 a year, only to find out we were probably creating $2.5 million in incremental value for them. So the value exchange, they won in that deal. And I was okay with that, because I kid with people, I probably would have paid them to take the product just to get the validation. But in hindsight, it turns out we were creating enormous value relative to what we were charging, which again became very exciting. And once we knew that and figured out how to tell that story, once we got in front of people, we ultimately were able to kind of parlay that where they too were able to kind of trust and believe and ultimately adopt. And no question, we stubbed our toe plenty of times along the way, but it kind of stayed a direct model. We could talk about it. Like we've tried channel partners. We tried lots of different ways, but ultimately, especially for this niche product that not a lot of people understand, we found like and maybe we were at fault, maybe we weren't good at it, but we couldn't figure out how to train anyone else how to do it better. And so we really just stuck to it and kept doing it ourselves.
So what's your advice on structuring the pricing models of services or products for startup founders?
So I've heard people say there's kind of 3 ways to price a product. You do it on value, value, understand the value creating and capture a slice of the value. Is it that? Is it cost plus, where you understand your cost, you're going to put a margin on top of that, and that's a way to price? Or is it even competition driven, where if you're in a crowded space and maybe you know the market norms of competition, you either want to be the premium product or you want to be at parity or you want to undercut the market and you're doing it competition based. I personally am not a fan of competition or cost plus. I'm a huge fan of value-based pricing. How do we figure out how much value that we're creating with our products? And how do we then capture a fair slice of that? And initially, to your point, Martin, when in the early days, it means you have to make a lot of assumptions, and it's okay to be wrong. I still remember our first clients, our pitches, where we'd come up with a proposal of how we were going to charge. And one of the people we were selling to said back to me, like, why this? And I was thinking to myself, like, I'm going to tell him, but I'm probably going to regret this. So, and what I said to him, his name was Dale. I said, Dale, I'm probably going to regret saying this to you, but this is my equation behind the scenes. I know I need to deliver more value to you than I take in what I charge you. Otherwise, you should not work with me. If I don't deliver more value, obviously you don't need me. You should not do it. You'd be better off not doing it. Meanwhile, I also know I need to make money to be a business and ultimately to build something viable, because even if I don't make money, but I solve your problem, ultimately I will go out of business. And now we're back to square one because I've no longer solved your problem. So 2 things are true. I need to deliver more value to you than I take, and I need to make money. And the truth of it is, I don't know exactly how much value I'm going to create yet. I've got here's my assumptions, and here's what I'm proposing I charge you. And as you can see, if I'm right, you're going to get the better end of this deal. And here's the next part. Say I'm wrong. So if I'm right, you're gonna be happy, and maybe we exceed it. I hope we exceed it. As it turned out, we exceeded it wildly, but hopefully we exceed it. But if I'm wrong and I don't deliver as much value, what I'll do is I'll make it right. I have to figure out how to deliver more value to you, or I know you should stop working with me. So as long as you look at it that way, no matter what we sign on this piece of paper, ultimately I have to deliver more value to you, and that is what I'm very committed to doing. And so we're very aligned, because the way I structured the initial contracts, if we didn't deliver, they would stop using the product. And so I was willing to bet on myself. I was willing, our team, we knew, like, great, we'll take that bet all day long. And so for us, I'm sure there are other approaches that others have very successfully done, but in our case, it was, let's obsess over value creation. And then the last thing I'll say is, because we knew we had these grand aspirations for what we were going to do over time. And so we didn't want to necessarily capture all of the value in the initial product, meaning we didn't want to create some big barrier to entry. Even if we knew the first product, we were giving them more value than we were taking. But if we thought there was any resistance to price, let's not be short-sighted, like penny wise, pound foolish. Let's actually think about the long game of what we're trying to do. I've heard other people say, let's be long-term greedy, meaning let's play the long game as we're going to build an initial wedge product. And over time, we know there's so many ways to expand, the ways we can create value and extract value and make money. And so that was our approach. I feel it's still our approach today. I feel very strongly about that. And, for any founders out there, that's an approach that has worked for us, at least.
Amen. I think it's the best explanation of this I've ever heard. Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
value-based pricing. Chase, what's some of the key lessons you've learned while scaling Built?
How long you got, Owen? One of them that always comes to mind is beyond, of course, you need to find big problems to solve. That's just, at the very beginning, are you solving important problems? And because if you're going to scale, like you need to have something big to go after. But one piece is not that I didn't try to do this from the beginning, but in hindsight, you always get smarter. And it's how do you build talent density really early so that then you can build a talent vortex around that talent density, because we've all heard A players attract A players, or Clydesdales want to run with Clydesdales. And we've also heard the A players attract A players, but B players attract C players and all these things. And it's very real. So to scale, and not to say go find all these people that aren't stage appropriate to the stage you're at. Like go find all the big people. Oh, they're at a big company, therefore let's go get them. And that'll translate to us because we want to be big. So let's just plant people that have been in big environments in a small little startup. It's a mindset. I think that you've got to have people that actually know how to meet you where you are. And ideally, yes, either have seen scale themselves or are really quick learners. And typically you find out they're highly intellectually curious about how to continue growing, because as humans in the world, it's not natural to grow on a J curve, to grow exponential. Typically it's more natural to grow on kind of a linear curve, or even at some point it tapers off and you flatline. So for all of us out there that are trying to scale things to be really big, what we're effectively doing is trying to kind of defy gravity. And so you need people, both a balance of people that ideally have potentially seen it themselves and can help you understand and kind of see around those corners so that you can grow into it. But also sometimes it's people that haven't necessarily seen it themselves, but they have, and they're very unique, but have the ability to scale with it because they always stay a step ahead, because they're just continuously trying to learn and seek understanding of how have other people done this, and they're kind of feeling their way through it. But for me, it comes back to ultimately like get the best damn people you can possibly get that are mission aligned, culturally aligned, which is a whole different conversation, and then give them the agency to go do it and learn fast, so through the scaling journey. And I do think there's kind of obvious inflection points of as a business grows, and we've experienced it where we have been far from perfect. But I do think one thing we have done is we have this willingness, like we don't want to make it harder than it needs to be. I was just having a chat actually with some folks at Built, some new folks that just joined, and I was like, what stands out? And they're like, I haven't yet heard anyone say, well, this is how we've always done it. Like to sink their heels into why we would keep doing something a certain way. There's much more of, here is how we do it. What do you think? Like, is there a better way? Like, we don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. And I think as you're scaling, at least in Built, that's been, I think, an important mindset to have. Not that it was so intentional, it's just, but it turns out the type of culture we built, the type of people we've surrounded ourselves with do tend to have that mindset.
Okay. And how do you build this culture, and how do you keep this talent acquisition successful, like having 240 or 260 employees right now?
By the way, there's a lot of values. I was checking them out before we hit record.
There are. So my thought, so culture evolves. I don't think I'll say anything on here today that there's people so much smarter than me that talk on this, but I'll give you my view on culture.
But you have the proof.
Ultimately, culture is action. We live it every day. You can't fake the culture. And yes, Owen, you saw the 11 guiding principles that we have. To me, and we spent a lot of time documenting those. And frankly, I think a lot about how can we even simplify that down more and distill it more to kind of the core of what really matters most. But we did put a lot of intentionality into those, and I believe in all of those that we have. But for me, as the years have gone on, I've certainly tried to live it every day, with my actions and with the people I've tried to seek out. It took longer than it should have for us to codify those values, because we've had multiple iterations of codifying our values. It took too long. And the reason it's so important is no different than when you're hiring people and you need to do the skills assessment. Do they, if you're hiring a data scientist, they probably need to know data science versus just like, well, they're a really good culture fit. I think they'll just fit in. Sometimes skill definitely matters, but the culture piece, the reason it matters so much in hindsight to me now is it's okay to certainly to not try to be all things to all people. Not only is it okay, I think it's imperative that we do have a culture. There are certain things that we try to live and breathe every single day, and that make us who we are as a company, and I do think have contributed to the success we've had and to the success we will have over time. Those cultural values, those guiding principles, won't align with everyone else out there in the world, and that is okay. There is not a right or wrong to it, but they are our cultural kind of principle values, and if we can codify those, two things can be true. As we're recruiting talent, it should help us know what to look for better. As we're recruiting talent, really people, as we're recruiting people, it should help them understand, wow, these are the things that are important to build. If those don't align with their own value system, you probably shouldn't want to come to Built. And that's okay. Just like if you don't like the problems we're solving at Built, there's a lot of problems in this world of ours that need to be solved. That's beautiful. I would much rather get that out of the way early. Go solve those problems. But if you like these problems, then you probably also need to be the right cultural fit. And everyone's going to inflect more or less on different parts of our value system. And then the last part is accountability for the people that are here. People grow and evolve, and it becomes a great accountability tool where we have a common language of how we talk about how we're executing in our people. And so if we ever see someone living out one of our kind of guiding principles, we can all talk about it in the same frame of reference. Or if we see someone not living one of our values, it's also really easy for us to call it out. Like, hey, you didn't do this. Or someone might call me out. Hey, Chase, we say, X guiding principle is part of our value system and you did this. What up? I'm like, and to me, that to me is part of a healthy code. You should be able to do that. No one's above it. We have to live and breathe it every single day. So I think it's very important to codify and then try in some way, shape, or form to use it in the way you hire, to use it in the way you hold yourselves accountable, to use it in the ways the language of the business day to day. And again, if you're an early startup, you don't necessarily need to come up with some mechanized, process-oriented way to do all of that. I think, do it in your own stage appropriate way, but figure out how you're going to protect those and be unapologetic about them. Don't try to be all things to all people. Because it's not that I try to be all things to all people. Sometimes I had the cultural values or the guiding principles that were important to me and that I cared about. And every now and then, particularly in the COVID area where we were hiring a lot of people fully remote and we were learning a new muscle there, where frankly, we didn't do such a great job at using those and communicating how important they were to us as we were bringing certain people in, which was not their fault. It's really I have to look in the mirror. That's our fault. And then once it got in, it was like, ooh, this doesn't feel right. And in a healthy business, in my opinion, usually if there's a non-culture fit, it should bounce itself out, or you should do something internally to get it out, because otherwise, if you start to tolerate something that you don't deem as a cultural fit, then the tail can start to wag the dog, and now you're lost. You're all thing. You're trying to be all things to everyone, and you're therefore you're really nothing. And so again, I have so many lessons learned of that, and I'm still learning how to be better at that. But I damn sure know that it is. Once you have the big problem you're anchored at solving, and you've hopefully clearly communicated that to the team, this I would say is one of the most important parts at ultimately whether or not you're going to execute it, or execute it as fast as you could, because we should all be competing with the potential of our opportunity. We shouldn't be competing with some bullshit benchmark, or this thing said you're supposed to grow at this rate and that. Like, to me, you should grow at your potential, and we should all hold ourselves accountable to as we're building our businesses. That's the scariest thing to hold yourself accountable to, potential. Because if you're solving big ass problems that there's other people out there trying to solve them too, you got to get after it. And it's something I think about a lot. I want to be better at it even in Built. But I know that hopefully everyone out there building companies is thinking about it that way.
I think we should maybe focus on some, because we've really got like 10 or so minutes left. Time flies, hey. So maybe we should focus on something unique, and I'm teased it in the introduction, but the value unicorn status. So what were the investors looking at when they valued Built? I think the article was back in 2021 was 1.5 billion.
Yep. So ultimately, I think it probably came down to, I'll say like three team, TAM, traction. I think that at that point, the things were going. I think that, in most vertical SaaS, vertical markets, it's, others, I'll shout out to Tidemark Ventures. I think they probably, it's like win your initial category, expand the product suite, and then extend through the value chain. I love they simple. I told Dave, who started Tidemark, I'm like, man, you could have saved me a lot of heartache over the years because you said it so much better than I've always attempted to say it. But I knew that's what we were trying to do: win the first thing, earn the right to expand the offerings, and then extend to serve other stakeholders and build this really special thing. And ultimately, though, I think what investors saw was that's what Built was doing. We in the initial product that we offered, the construction loan administration product, we still have a long way to go, but I think that a lot of people would say we won that category and we're winning it. We got to earn the right to keep winning it, but we won that category and we've expanded the offerings, and we were even winning some of those kind of attachment offerings as well. And that I think people realized if Built just does that and continues to get after that, this is going to be a really big and even special company in and of itself. But I knew the real reason that we started the company, as shared earlier, was not just to build software, and marketplace services for lenders. It was to actually solve the problems for the industry, to connect and simplify doing business in real estate, and like fundamentally transform commerce, which to me means you have to serve the owners and the contractors and all these ecosystem participants. And I think a lot of the investors saw like, wow, that opportunity coupled with what's already working is very special. And the unit economics of Built were very strong. A lot of the growth metrics that everyone did look at, the net revenue retention and the retention rates and like no churn and 99.999% logo retention and all of these things that they were watching that every investor rightfully looks at were considered best in class. And yet, I hit it off with the person who led that round was Woody Marshall at TCV. And one of the things I loved about how Woody talked about things was he saw this big opportunity of kind of the consumerization of enterprise technology. Because you think about what we were doing for financial institutions and even with large developers and contractors was building, frankly, enterprise technology, but trying to do it in unbelievably almost like consumer tech friendly ways, intuitive, collaboration forward. It's just smart. It's just obvious that it should work that way. And he's seen that in a lot of different companies over his career. And it's like, yes, I want to bring that to our space. And so we hit it off on that. And then I think our team, we were beginning to form really an executive team that could complement us and me, that has seen things that I hadn't seen or that we hadn't seen, but yet we thought could meet us where we were. And it was just a really strong team that clearly was excited about the mission we were on versus just a bunch of mercenaries. And so I think the confluence of all of that ultimately led to kind of this realization of like, yeah, we want to be involved. And it came out at the kind of the unicorn status, which was special as a milestone. And ultimately, though, what none of us knew is if you think about it, post that, the world of real estate and construction and finance was about to get body slammed coming out of COVID as runaway inflation took off, as we all know. We were still combating supply chain issues at the time, big time, that affected our end market in a major way. And then all of a sudden, back in when rates started, when the Fed finally announced that, like, yeah, as it turns out, inflation's not transitory. We are going to have to figure out how to curb this, and we're going to start hiking rates in like the most dramatic fashion in a very, very long time, kind of a perfect storm. And as it turns out, that had huge repercussions on our end market, and frankly allowed, like, we had to duck and bob through that and also figure out new ways to add value to our clients. And risk management became a lot more important than just the efficiency gains or customer improvements, things like that. But, to answer your question related to the round, those were the kind of the things, the kind of the equation that I know was on that side of how they ultimately got to the conclusion on how to value us and why they wanted to be a part of this for the long run.
Okay. I've got two last questions. One is actually touches on the rates. I've heard that community banks are particularly vulnerable to the rates for some reasons. I don't know the details, but maybe you can demand that. Does it have any impact on like what you see through the platform and through your SaaS, that there is like more defaults from the construction loans compared to prior 2021, 22?
Yeah. So the first part that I think is a fun little fact for a lot of people, because before all of this happened, everyone always used to ask, what happens if rates go straight up? Like, is that just going to decimate your business and all this bad stuff? And the reality is, if you look back at, call it 50 years, some of the highest interest rate environments happen to also be some of the highest construction output environments in history. And it's counterintuitive, like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you kind of double click or double tap on that, the reality is what it's actually perfectly correlated with construction output. It is household formation. And it just so happens, I'll pick on, again, the US, there's 91 million Americans between the age of 30 and 45 years old that are forming households at the same time as we have a lack of inventory, both housing inventory. And this sounds like I'm just talking about housing, but in all reality, it's not. It's household. Everything spins off that, where you live, work, and play, the infrastructure that connects us. All of these things actually spin off of kind of household formation. And not just that, but that is a big part of it. And so when rates go parabolic, yes, it shocks the system as it has, and it absolutely has rolled through with community, regional, super regional, money center banks, private credit, anyone involved in real estate. It has had a ripple effect in a pretty major way. Some of our clients, like our average client at one point, from kind of peak to trough, had dropped their origination volume 57%. And so, said another way, because we have a value-based pricing model, even on our SaaS stuff, to outrun that, if you just want to stay flat, you need to grow 57%.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know there's a lot of people out there, like, doing that, especially as the numbers get bigger, isn't such an easy feat, let alone if you want to grow on top of that. And so yes, in our data, we have seen contracted volumes. There's other reasons for that too. There became, in the banking space, regulatory scrutiny, liquidity issues that have cascading implications on, percentage of risk-based capital aimed at construction or commercial real estate. And there's limitations, that there's kind of guidance from regulators on what they want to see. Otherwise, you're considered over-concentrated, or kind of highly volatile commercial real estate is a real thing that they track. And so for us, we look at that, and we want to help our clients, but on the default side, it's not that we've seen tons of defaults happen, and they've marginally spiked, but it's on the construction side of things, at least in our client base, for whatever reason, it's not like they were hyper exposed to speculative office construction, which has absolutely, depending on the market, been pretty decimated. So if they were hyper concentrated in that, then I would imagine those are where you're going to see kind of more defaults. No question, absorption of whether it's multifamily, retail, these mixed use projects, industrial, whatever it may be that people were constructing and getting loans on those, depending on where you are, the absorption or sales occurred faster or slower than they expected. And sometimes, yes, that ended up resulting in, or has ended up resulting in default events. But we, fortunately, and for our clients, haven't seen a ton of the default as much as the need to be more patient than what they originally intended. And it helps that there's a lot more equity in deals. So it's harder for the sponsors, the borrowers, ultimately, to want to just hand the keys back and say, you can take this thing, because they've got a lot of skin in the game, which I do think has contributed to kind of a healthier environment where you don't see as many of the default events.
Okay.
Owen?
One last one. We'll keep this one quick. But what's is 2025? Well, what's Bill's IPO story, if that's the aim?
Yeah.
It's a to me, an IPO, that for me, to each their own, isn't the Super Bowl of that's how I know I made it as a founder and we went public. It's an event, and if in fact a public offering, if that's the right thing for really our to accomplish for us to reach the full potential of our opportunity and to serve our customers and create shareholder value, which no question is the game. If being public is the right thing, then hell yeah, I'm trying to build a company that puts us in position to do that. That said, I'd be lying if I told you that I am particularly excited about being public. I see it creates a lot of perverse incentives there's plenty of people smarter than me that have talked on kind of the short-term nature of quarterly thinking, and you got to hit your EPS target you miss it by a penny and it's catastrophic, and can create lots of noise that for me, because of the way I like to think about the business, very, very long-term, what's just the right thing for product execution. And sometimes we stumble into things that we didn't know when we created our plan that we want to go do. And I want to be able to do those things. And again, I'm naive on the topic, guys, because I'm sure there's other people that would say, and there are, that clearly people do it. Being public, you can do all that while you're public. I just think that for us, if and when that happens, it's another milestone, but it's that hopefully we would have done for only the right reasons, because we believe it's going to help us reach the potential of the opportunity. And I'm very, very fortunate that kind of our investors are very, very aligned on that and long-term thinking with us on how do we really build a special company, very durable and kind of enduring and compounds for decades. That to me is the goal here. And somewhere along that journey, if IPO is the right path, then hell yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Cool. All right, Chase.
Thank you very much. So much wisdom.
Yes, so much.
We enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing and just trying to kind of raise awareness in the space. There's so many important problems that need to be solved. We need more innovators that are helping the people that build and then own and operate, the community and the world, the physical world around us. And there's so much opportunity out there. It's silly.
We got this. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chase.